So to finish up our talk on population before we move into migration, which is all part of the same unit, we'll talk about where people are distributed. So 2/3 of the world's inhabitants are clustered in 4 regions. They're in East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe. This can be kind of confusing because when we talk about the world's largest countries, the U.S. is one of the world's most populous countries. But we're looking at clustering, so we're looking at the concentration of people. And we know the U.S. is a really, really big country. The United States of America has a huge amount of land mass. So we don't have a high concentration of people, nor do we have the highest population density for our country. So we're looking at concentration and population density. And so North America isn't going to make the cut, even though that within the North America you have the United States, one of the most populous countries, and then Mexico, which is also one of the most populous countries. So the regions will be East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and then Europe. And we know that when you look at it at a larger scale, it might change that perspective. Let's talk about the site and situation of these clusters. These population clusters tend to be low-lying areas with fertile soil and a temperate climate. And they tend to be near an ocean or near a river with easy access to an ocean. So here's our site, here's our situation. Here is a cartogram, just kind of like the one we have in the classroom on the wall. And so here you can see China, India, really large countries. Each block is, I believe each block is 1 million, just like the blocks on our walls in our classroom. The U.S., Mexico, Brazil. So these are the most populous countries in the world. So you have China, India, the U.S., Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, Nigeria, Russia, and Japan, and then Pakistan. So if you are looking at the most populous countries, I would be familiar with these, even though that's different from the most populous regions. So if you look at populous regions, that's why you get into things like Europe, East Asia, Southeast Asia, because these are areas that have high densities of people. When we look at what is the world's most sparsely populated areas, people tend to avoid clustering in certain physical environments. So sites that's really dry or it's too wet, places that are really cold, or places that are really high or mountainous. So these places that are considered to be too harsh for occupancy have diminished over time or gotten smaller. Think about Florida. Florida is both too hot and too wet, right? So if you lived here before the 20th century, you would have had, hurricanes that would have torn your homes apart, constant flooding. Obviously, there's no air conditioning yet. And so Florida wasn't widely populated, but today it is because we have modern conveniences that made it easier. We dredged up land, we filled in soil, we raised the land, we have air conditioning, and all of that made South Florida seem habitable when before it wasn't. Places of permanent human settlement are termed the ecumen. So here, this is in 5000 BC, this was the ecumen. This is where most people were permanently settled in the world. And then by AD 1, people had spread out into throughout northern Africa, down to sub-Saharan Africa. This is the Sahara Desert here. Central America, the southern part of North America, southern part of the United States, the northern part of Latin America, East Asia, Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia. Then by AD 1500, people had spread out even further throughout Africa, throughout Latin America. And then by AD 1900, people are spread out throughout everywhere except for, again, places that are deserts. So desert area, too cold, desert, too cold. And then this area here, most of this is rainforest. Population density can be computed in 3 ways for a place. And we talked about these a little bit earlier this year, and we're going to go over them more in class. We have arithmetic density, and that's what we've been doing in class, the total number of people per square mile. So you've been doing this already. The number of people per square mile or square kilometer. We also have physiological density. This is the number of people per unit of arable land. So this is the number of people and the amount of land that can be farmable. Arable means farmable. So how much land do you have that can grow food? And so the physiological density is really like how many people could be supported by growing food within an area. And then agricultural density is the number of farmers to the number of the amount of arable land. And this can give you a lot of clues to the level of development because the United States has a high physiological density. We have a lot of rich, fertile land, but we have a low agricultural density because we have large industrial farms. So we don't have a huge number of farmers compared to other countries. So if you see a high agricultural density, it might tell you that you have a lot of smaller family farms or subsistence farm going on, where people are raising food for themselves and not for sale. So here you can see the population density, and you can see those regions again, the most populous regions lit up. But now if you look at the physiological density, persons per square kilometer of arable land, you can see that some areas, the areas start to change. So places where we don't have a lot of arable land start to change. And then farmers per square kilometer of arable land, you see a very different pattern. So this tells you really how much farmland you have and how many people compared to how many people you have. And this tells you how many people are farming the land. And so again, we talk about like China being a developing country still. You can see they still have a lot of farmers. And there's nothing wrong with having a lot of farmers, but having this many farmers means that the people who are living outside of the urban areas are probably living on smaller subsistence farms. And that is it.